meeting to order at 7:04.
7:04.
Roll call, please.
All right, Director Reddick.
Here.
Director Blanchard.
Here.
Director Warren.
Present.
Director Slater-Carter.
Present.
Director Penrose.
Here.
Director Boyd.
Here.
Woo! Everybody's here.
Okay, public comment, oral communication. I don't see a lot of people in the audience. I don't have any speaker slips. Let us go into closed session.
All right.
We're in.
Recycled? Was it recycled?
Yeah, with special counsel
Oh.
for recycled water and trying to negotiate and figure out what would happen if we couldn't negotiate with CCWD. Is that sound
Hasn't
familiar?
changed yet.
Anybody?
Or it doesn't get
Session.
any better.
I hope the camera, is it on now? There it is. I've got to look for the red light. I don't see a red light. Anyway, let's convene an open session. No action having been taken. Do we have any, once again, we are at public comment, oral communication. Do we have anybody on the board or in the audience?
We need to report out on.
I thought I just
Yep.
did. No, we came out of closed session and no action was taken. And I see no public comment. Consent agenda.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I was not here for the July 27th or August 21st meetings, so I'm going to be,
July 20th.
Those were our special sessions, the special meetings that,
Ooh.
except for the other one, you weren't here for 3 of them.
The 14th, you weren't here.
Yeah.
Yeah, are we taking comments on that now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, there is a comment, made in the, I guess it's the one following the 14th.
21st.
Yeah. No, it's not the 21st, it was the, oh my God, so many meetings. At any rate, the meeting where, Chairperson Slater-Carter had apologized, to me for interrupting me. That is mentioned in the minutes. However, there's no discussion of, during the minutes when the incident happened about what happened. And I understand minutes are difficult to transcribe, but if we're gonna be saying something that relates to a previous meeting, I think we should be talking about what happened at the previous
Oh, it was
meeting.
August 7th. Yeah. It's the August 7th meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. It was in the public comment communication item number 2.
And so what do you suggest?
Just taking it out?
No, I'd like to rewrite the minutes from the, session where it occurred.
July.
Include it.
Okay, I'll have to go back and find, that might have been the July 24th meeting, but I think that's what it was. So I'll have to go back.
That was the one, that was the regular meeting before that.
Yes, yeah, because the previous meeting was the 27th and that wasn't it, so it would have been the
That was
24th. So I can go back and watch the video of when that occurred.
Thank you.
And do that. So you want to add it to the 24th minutes, or do you want to add it to the August 7th minutes?
I think they ought to be amended. I don't want to approve those minutes
Which
as
one,
is.
7th or 24th?
Whichever one it happened at, and I'm having trouble with
24th
all
would be
these
the one
here.
it happened at.
I'm
Okay.
pretty sure it was 24th.
Okay.
Okay, so then the August 7th would still be correct in the apology.
Yes,
You
yes.
just want to make sure it's recorded in whichever set of minutes where it happened.
As a response, right.
It will be tough because there were about 3 people talking at that point in time.
Yeah.
I think I
I
can
know,
figure it
I know
out.
it's tough. That's why I made that comment. It's very difficult to transcribe minutes.
Okay, I will go
But if
back.
we could summarize it
I
in a
will,
simple way, that would be great.
I will make an attempt to do so. So, since I believe that was the 24th, then the other minutes, the
That was
27th,
July 24th.
July
July
24th,
twenty-fourth, yeah, the minutes that keep coming back.
the minutes that won't go away. So the July 27th, the August 7th, the August 14th, and the August 21st would not be affected by that.
Right.
Okay, so just the one.
While you're correcting the July 24th minutes, when we look at PDF page 8,
Mm-hmm.
the indented A, adopt a resolution approving what?
Adopt a resolution, next number in sequence, approving and adopting the JPA general budget and adopting, poison, position, yeah, it keeps doing autocorrect with this typo, but yes, I will fix that since we're fixing the other thing
Now,
anyway.
I have a general request on the minutes, which in this packet, this packet kind of demonstrates why this is a necessary request. Could you arrange to have at the top or bottom of every page of the minutes after page 1, the date of the minutes?
Sure,
Using the word header, footer, whatever.
yeah,
That'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah,
minutes,
That's very
especially when we do a bunch of them at once. It's-
yeah, which I hope to not ever have to do again, but yes, yeah, minutes.
Do we have any other comments on changes to the minutes?
So we'll just pull the 24th off of that.
August 14th, I have several small changes.
What,
Shall we just pull all the minutes off the consent agenda?
Yeah.
Proceed to
No,
take them one by one?
if no one
That's a good
else
idea.
if no one else has changes, these are just a few small ones.
Okay.
On page 15 of the minutes, we have second line, announced that he board would convene.
Oh, the board, okay,
Typo.
Typo. all right.
And then on page 16, the following page, under the $911,392.50 for July, August, and September, between that, the end of that sentence and the beginning of General Counsel Nelson, General Counsel Nelson was responding to a question from Director Warren about the implications of accepting the $911,000 check. And I think that's important because otherwise it looks like General Counsel Nelson's just
Talking. Okay.
interrupting, yeah.
General Counsel Nelson was responded to a question from Director Warren
Right. And then
about
on
accepting check.
page 17, the paragraph begins with General Counsel Nelson excused himself, and then, so that's line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then between is not named in the litigation and Director Boyd asserted, Directors Warren and Slater Carter both commented that the cover page of the lawsuit named Sam as a real party in interest.
Okay, so I will pull the 14th then and bring it back with those corrections.
Thank
Because I
you.
want to make sure we get those correct. So now we're down to the 27th.
Oh, wait, and on the 18, we adjourned the meeting to finish the agenda that was not able to be completed by 9 o'clock. It says
He's asking for an
adjourned
addition.
at 8:15, and it was because we,
No,
it says this
8:59.
item was not addressed, this item was not addressed, it was because it became 9 o'clock and there, we
During the
didn't
meeting at
have time.
8:59, due to the time.
Yep,
Which
Okay.
page are you on?
page 18.
Okay, I will make that note as well. So we have the 27th, July 27th, August 7th, and August 21st that are okay.
Yep.
Okay, so those three.
Do
So
we have a
July
motion?
27th.
So moved.
A second.
August 21.
Which minutes are we?
Jim seconded. Yoo-hoo!
Which minutes are we approving?
July,
Last three.
July 27th, August 7th, August 21st.
All right, the ones on the second line on the agenda.
Yeah, the special ones.
Well, I was not here.
July
You
27th.
can recuse yourself or you can vote. You're entitled to either
Okay,
one.
and that was, Director Penrose moved
Yes, and
and Director
Blanchard.
Blanchard seconded. Okay, just wanna make sure I had the people right.
Yeah, my long-time understanding that you can vote to approve minutes if, even though you weren't at the meeting, if you believe that the minutes accurately reflect what.
Is that true?
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Interesting.
Yep. Okay, so.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the minutes. Should we, all those in favor of approving the minutes?
All the
Aye.
three you named.
Of the three named, yes.
Aye.
Approve disbursements for August 28th.
I have questions on at least one item.
Okay.
there.
Yes.
Have to get there. I don't remember seeing AT&T fiber optic previously.
That's correct. It's our new billing plan. We moved to a T1 line to reduce our costs.
I didn't know you could still get a T1, I thought they were
Yeah,
outside.
well, they didn't want to, but the cost for dragging fiber optic over here, we would have to pay for it. It was over $200,000. So we said, no, thank you. The T1 was the alternative because we were paying about an average of $1,200 a month.
What does this replace?
Just the regular program we were on. Basically, the CalNet program expired, and so we were just paying a regular billing rate.
Is this for phone or
Phone.
replacing the DSL?
No, it's the phone. It's the phone system.
Hmm.
Yep. And bundling all of the lines on the T1 plan drops it down by almost half.
Yeah, we had some.
Yeah, so, and we've been going through this since December that I got here. We've been going through, they've just completely dropped the ball, and I've gone through 7 or 8 representatives from AT&T trying to get this resolved. We finally have it resolved, but, and we're expecting a credit to our account of about $8,000 because they're backdating it to when they were supposed to do it correctly, so.
Okay, one other question, there's some other things I may ask you offline later. On page 26, the payment to SRT, there's a line item for recycled water project services. Why are we still spending money on that?
That was the 25% design. We've been
Okay.
holding the invoices because we didn't have a budget.
All right.
So the 25% design was completed, but we hadn't paid the final invoices for it because of the lack of a budget.
'Cause I think that we need to suspend spending any money on that until the lawsuit is resolved, because I would speculate that 1 or 2 member agencies are not gonna spend any more money on that if after the wins the
Well,
lawsuit.
Let's-
All we've done
let's-
is just pick the final invoice on the
Let's-
25%
Okay.
design.
Let's make that an agenda item at the appropriate time then. So, shall we move on to remove monthly financial report? Any more questions on this?
I'm done with that.
Okay. Any more questions on this one?
Move approval.
Do we wanna move along with C, the financial report?
Sure. DNC.
Okay, any questions on the financial report? Okay, hearing none, you made a motion to move approval of B and C, do we have a second? Thank you, Scott. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Moving on to old business,
Madam Chair,
yes.
I recommend that we move up item D, since it seems like A, B, and C might have more discussion. We could consider D, and expedite that item as certain other agencies.
Do I hear any objections?
Well, since I saw pages with all of the agency attorney signatures, I'll move approval of, or
ratification of the
Ratification.
execution of the stipulation and order by general counsel on August 21, 2017, and general manager's issuance of invoices to member agencies on August 22nd, 2017 pursuant to the signed stipulation and order.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
I thought so.
So Warren moved, did anybody second? I didn't hear.
Second.
Second by Ruddick. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? 7D carries. Moving back to 7A, discuss and establish minimum staffing levels as required by the NPDES Compliance Evaluation Inspection Report.
Okay, we did discuss this a little bit at the last meeting, but for the lack of quorum, we weren't able to take any action. This is the last possible date for us to be able to take action and be able to respond within the time frame that we have for the response to the evaluation report. First of all, we were in the process of doing the staffing analysis as requested as part of the strategic plan, and we had planned on sort of dovetailing this into the fiscal year 18-19 budget, so we weren't rushing it along. And then when the state inspector was here regarding the permit, made a comment about this, and then of course codified it in his report, we realized we needed to expedite the analysis, so I had requested the consultant to move up their timeline. And then of course many things happened, like the lack of a budget, the lawsuit and things, so it's been languishing for inability to move things along on the agendas. But we do need to be able to respond to the state, because this will be included in what the board looks at when they're reviewing our permit application for renewal. So we don't want to not respond to it. And then the recommendation in here from staff does not include all of the positions that are indicated in the analyses. It's really a compromise to the staffing levels that the analysis indicates could be done, and really looking at just that we would continue to contract out specialized work that we already do, that we would contract out items that come up that are specialized or infrequent, because it doesn't make sense to upstaff for those activities. But sort of the recurring workload types of projects and activities, that's what's in here. And this would be really truly minimal staffing, supplemented throughout based on what the needs are from year to year. But trying to understand that we need to be able to indicate to the state that we've addressed their concerns regarding staffing and how we're able to manage both emergency response and preventive maintenance issues, as well as being very cognizant of the cost of that. So this recommendation is that compromise. It is by no means excessive compared to what the data does indicate.
Comments?
Yeah, is it, from your point of view, is it adequate?
I would say the recommendation is adequate, with the understanding that we will have to supplement it with contract services as needed, whether they be for very specialized items or for infrequent recurring items. So there would be I don't have an idea yet what the cost of some of the contracting out might be. We would need to identify some of the items that would best be served by that. But for the staffing sort of day-to-day, I believe this is adequate. It is by no means the I don't know, it used to say Cadillac version, the Tesla version of staffing. So, I do believe that we can take this and argue to the state this is adequate staffing, adequate minimal staffing.
For the public, can you describe what the increases are over the
Sure.
current authorized staffing level.
Yes. So the first recommendation, this is obviously stepped in, it's not all at once, and we would provide along with the minimum staffing and implementation plan to the state, so they would understand the time frame. But for this current fiscal year, we would be looking at 1.5 FTE, full-time equivalent. One would be an operator in training, and the other would be making the accounting technician go from half-time to full-time to address some of the issues with regards to support, clerical support in the office. Then starting with the July 1, 2018 budget, it would be 2 additional positions, 1 more operator in training and a maintenance technician. The need for the operator in training is recognizing both the skill sets of the operators, that they have a broader job description, they can do maintenance and operations as well as some of the lab work. So looking at the ability to use it in the broadest sense of classification, but also recognizing the succession planning because of the employees who are reaching retirement age, 2 of them are operators, and it takes 2 years for someone to go from nothing, the operator in training, to an operator 2, which for our plant is what it's required for that person to be on standby and respond by themselves, or to be here like on a Saturday or a Sunday by themselves. They have to be a 2, with a 3 on the phone. A 3 has to be reachable.
So, question on the on the second year, the additional maintenance technician, which division?
These are all for the plant, the JPA portion. There are no recommendations for the collection system.
Okay,
Contract
that's
collection
just not
system.
clear from the document.
I'm sorry, yes, all of these are related to just SAM, the JPA. The staffing analysis that was performed by Doug Humphrey a 1.5 years ago, which they also folded into this, it indicated that with some efficiencies, we could, the staffing that we have, those 5 bodies are sufficient. So, and we have seen some of that. We've already implemented some of the recommendations, and we are seeing those efficiencies, and we are able to cover the requirements of the contract services with those 5 FTE.
I have a question. Half Moon Bay, from what I have heard, is still considering dropping the collections contract system contract. And would that change then the staffing levels for the JPA?
Potentially it could, because it would depend on if all of the member agencies decided to do so for whatever reasons, economies of scale or whatever. We do right now have a mutual agreement, sort of an unspoken mutual agreement between the side of the house that is SAM JPA and the side of the house that is the collection system. SAM itself has its own collection system. We have the force main, we have gravity line, and there's parts of that that we are responsible for doing maintenance on and having the equipment to respond to a spill. If we were to not have the collection system to do the mutual aid for when SAM has its own collections issues, we would have to ramp up the JPA staff because we wouldn't have sufficient staff if you just got rid of those 5 and we just had our staffing here, and we would need to retain that equipment because we would have to respond. There would be some amount of, we would probably contract out some of the work just because of the infrequency, but the ability to respond after hours and in an emergency, when you're sharing those on-calls, we would have to make sure to have enough staff so we wouldn't burn out staff with the standby.
Right.
I'm perfectly happy to support staff's recommendation insofar as it's personnel associated with delivering on the JPA as opposed to collections. We would feel that that would need more scrutiny, but I've been in favor previously of a full-time accounting technician, for instance, so I'm happy to support staff recommendation as long as we are clear that it's for the JPA purposes.
It is for the JPA purposes. These positions, the only where there's a crossover would be, for example, when The maintenance person who typically provides the service to the contract services is out on vacation, then obviously the JPA maintenance person goes and assists. And there's also cross-training that we do. But aside from that,
Well, I think cross-training is functionally important, so.
yes.
So what's changed from when Kim Solera did all the accounting stuff, and that was before we contracted out to Parsons, which I think happened when she left.
That's right.
Kim did all of the accounting, all the payroll with, I think, some low level of staff support, but I'm pretty sure the bulk of the work was done by her.
Yeah,
So
so all
I'm just
that's right.
unclear
All
on why
the
it
accounting,
takes
the
two
payroll.
people to do what Kim did.
the retirement, all the benefits, she did all that.
Yeah, so why does it take two people now to do what Kim did?
Well, it's far more complex in the reporting requirements than it used to be back then. And there were 3 clerical staff. So while she may have been touching everything, the reality of it is there were 3 clerical staff. How they divvied up the work, there were still 3 people for redundancy and people being out on vacation. Right now, we see an impact and also the ability to support other staff. And so in the staffing analysis that was done by MRG, part of the analysis was that we have several positions that are doing more clerical reporting function that really could be shifted off if we can rearrange some of how the work is being done in the clerical part of it. So we want to be able to do that, but we can't do it with a half-time person because of the type of workload that, and with the segregation of duty, you wouldn't want one person doing all of it. And as it is, when there's a shortage of staff, I end up being the backup, which means I'm performing functions that are, of course I can do them, but is it the best use of my time to being the backup? Because these are confidential issues,
Yeah.
especially the benefits and labor relations type of things. And the more that Kathy has to do is more that she has to shift off to me that she can't do because it's too much capacity. Plus, we have staff that could take the burden off of Kishan and Tim if they could focus on that instead of being the backup for some of this other stuff. So it's really trying to balance the workload in the most effective and efficient fashion and try to get them out of clerical stuff and worksheets and spreadsheets and stuff like that that really doesn't take their technical expertise. It just takes time.
So you're saying we're paying professional level salary wages for clerical work?
Yes.
Okay.
So, how much of the technical people's time gets freed up by shifting clerical stuff to this increase in the admin staff?
Well, all 3 of the positions, the manager positions, are doing clerical work. I believe the recommendation was for a full body. I'm compromising by saying we want to see how much efficiency we can get by just having a full-time instead of a half-time person and actually have the time to implement some of the recommendations to become more efficient. Then we can talk about if there's additional need. But right now, I think we can achieve some of that by implementing some of the software changes. For example, the MP2 system and the collection system software that we're using, which takes a lot of staff time. Just by implementing the new software system, we might be able to make it an easier process so that it shifts, not only takes less time, but shifts it to a more clerical function and less of a technical. Same thing with the accounting software, but we won't know until we actually implement. But I believe we should start with stepping it up gradually rather than jumping all in. And I think the halftime addresses that, as well as we can come back and report on what we believe the analysis shows after we've implemented
All
it.
right, but what I'm getting at is that we're being asked to increase the admin staff and the technical staff at the same time, but you're saying increasing the admin staff would allow you to shift some of that work away from the technical staff, which...
Different staff. So when I say technical staff, maybe I should say professional staff, so that it's the managers.
Yeah.
It's the three managers.
Right.
The additional operations work that's necessary, for example, Tim's got a sort of and Kish and both have a dual problem, which is they're picking up some of the workload for what the operators, maintenance, and some of the other staff should be doing, because somebody has to do it. So we're already pushing that work up instead of down. Secondly, they're doing clerical work, which should also be pushed down and over. So it's really going to help get them out of, they should not be doing day-to-day operations. So for example, when I'm short an operator, which has happened numerous times since I've been here, Tim is an operator, and so we pull him out of being a supervisor and doing all the things that are part of being a supervisor, and he becomes an operator for the day.
No, that's not good.
So that's what those additional hours of operator and training and maintenance will help do. There's also stuff that Kishin is doing to support the operators because they don't have sufficient time, and that's not the best use of Kishin's time either. So it's both clerical and technical that they're doing, that they should be up and out of that, because that's not the best use of our resources.
I guess I'm still concerned about setting the minimum staffing level when you have all kinds of other process changes, you know, better software and things like that you're looking at. But once we lock in the minimum staffing level, there's never any way to reduce it.
Well, let me make the point that the MRG staffing addressed this by saying the software and some of these other things we're talking about would get us at best a 25% impact in the total number of work hours needed to take care of things. Even including that, they're still recommending 3 FTE. And that's assuming we still continue to contract out more of the maintenance stuff than we already are. So even with all of those efficiencies, we would still need 3 FTE based on just the sheer number of available hours that we have with the staff number that we have right now. And predominantly, it's in operations. It's maintenance and operations. Clerical is part of it, so the clerical is really to address the overworkload of the 3 supervisors. Those positions have too much work because they're also trying to cover down. So if we can help them with that, they can actually focus on the stuff we're paying them to do, which is the higher level work. And then we have operations and maintenance.
Are there, and I don't necessarily expect that you can give an answer off the top to this, but is it likely that there's equipment changes that we could make, putting in newer and more modern stuff that would require less operator time, that when you pencil it out, comparing the cost of the equipment upgrade versus the staff time, or in some cases it might make sense to invest in newer, better equipment?
There might be, but I'm also planning for the retirements that are inevitably coming, and knowing that we have to hire locally because of the response time. Even if we could do all of those things, I still have to plan that in the next 2 to 5 years, at minimum, 2 of the operators could retire.
Yeah.
When we pass down the lab work from the lab staff to the operators, the lab time takes a huge amount of time away from what the operators can do. So we didn't gain anything by eliminating the lab staff. We just passed it on to a different set of people for workload, and it's gotten far more complicated than it was back when we did that. And it's going to get even more complicated. And you're talking about people that they're not lab people. That's not their, so the expertise and efficiency we're asking from them while they're also trying to do everything else. It makes more sense to find a better way of managing that necessary function. And even though we contract out for the actual testing, you still have all the sampling and the process testing. And as those requirements have gotten more technical, it takes a considerable more time than it used to 10 years ago or so when we reduced down. And that there's no one else that can do it but the operators.
So you're saying subsequent to when the lab director, who was 3 days a week at that time, recommended elimination of her job?
Yep. Yep. And so we pushed it to the operators, which is fine, except for there's not enough hours to do all of that, plus all of the other work that needs to be done. And one of the things that we've looked at is there's no time to really do a lot of analysis or look back, because you're just constantly moving forward. And that's how staying current in the industry and being able to actually participate in those things is how you know when things change. And things have changed in the lab and nobody knew it, because nobody was staying up to date on those things, because there just wasn't enough time. We cannot afford to do that in this industry. There's too much changing and it's changing too fast.
Why wasn't the contract lab aware of these changes?
They probably were, but it wasn't their responsibility to tell us. All they do is
Yes, it
test the
was.
all they do is test the sample. It's how the processes are happening in our own lab. All they do is test the sample that we give them. They're not doing oversight of our lab.
Okay,
We now have a consultant that we work with, and we've got our SOPs up to date, and we've managed to get us to where the processes are where they're supposed to be. But the problem is now it takes even more time, because that's where the industry is going, and we haven't even gotten the new T&I standards, and we anticipate those will be even more complex. And while we can use the consultant to assist us as sort of that overall keeping us in the know, there's the day-to-day stuff that the operators have to stay on top of, which means they have to go to trainings, because their primary focus isn't lab.
Is there any chance that it makes sense to hire a specific lab person?
We had MRG look at that, and right now, with the assumption of where the new T&I standards are going for small labs, no. That was their recommendation. However, if they don't have a step-down version of the new requirements for small labs, and they expect small labs to do what large labs do, we will have to. And we won't know that yet. They're still talking about, I don't know what the final date is on the new standards. So they're still discussing. In fact, Tim is going to be going to a training, is it September or October? October. Yeah.
There's a CWA one, and then there's one that the state is putting on, so there's two that are coming up, but it's a series of T&I standards that all wastewater labs are gonna have to be involved. It's not a question of
Right.
whether you want to, no, you are gonna be mandated.
The thing is, they're still in discussions about having labs of a certain size and smaller having a more streamlined version. That has not been finalized. They haven't made a final decision. If they do not offer a streamlined version for smaller labs will have to meet the same requirements as larger labs. And at that point, we'll have a discussion about what does that mean for Sam having a dedicated lab person.
What fraction of FTE now is spent by operators doing lab work?
Just think of a regular day, 4 hours a day, 4 hours a day.
So half FTE now across the operators?
Well, and that's not even including driving the samples out to Silicon Valley once a week
Yeah.
and any specialized stuff. That's just the regular day-to-day stuff. That's not the special samples we do.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's not inclusive of Wednesdays when we do all the solid sampling or special deliveries.
Yeah.
If I might just comment real quickly on process, we've got to stop at 9. We need to talk about the IPS.
Yes.
I want to make sure we leave time to do at least that. We've got other items as well.
Plus, every time she says lab, I think of Labrador retrievers.
Oh, sorry, yeah,
Who
there's
doesn't
no
love
lab
that?
here today.
who doesn't know that?
Sorry.
I do have some questions.
Go for it.
Gotta wait.
Are you done, Leonard?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we've got a section on fiscal impact with no numbers. It says it's all contingent on what we decide.
Mhm.
I want to see fiscal impact showing us what our decisions could cost. Right now, what I see, after reading this very carefully, is we would have one operator in training this year, and half of an account tech this year, and then, and I'm having to put all this into a table myself. And then next year, an operator in training and a maintenance tech. And then we also have services that would be outsourced to contract services. I don't have a number on any one of those items.
And I
And I'm being
apologize.
asked to approve a budget or a staffing level
Yep.
without actually being able to comprehend the budget impact.
And I
can pencil it
apologize.
out, but we know what an operator in training costs, we know what a maintenance tech
Yes.
costs. I wanna see the fully loaded numbers in here, and we're down to the wire on this.
Yes,
And really, I think probably one of the biggest impacts is what we're proposing to push out to contract services.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, a stab in the dark would be better than what we've got.
well, and I apologize, an earlier version of this had the number in it, and it's been rewritten to address concerns, and I'm sorry somehow in those iterations, because I had originally put in, it was approximately 100,000 for this year, with an additional 200,000 the following year. And that was based on an estimate of when we would actually be able to onboard someone, go through the recruiting process and actually get somebody
Does that
on
take into
staff.
account contract services?
No, that is just the staffing, because right now, what we're hoping to do, and one of the recommendations from the MRG, is to talk with some of our contractors that we do sort of as-needed response to things, and get them on a schedule where we get a set number of hours every week, where we can start planning and use the same amount of money that we're spending right now, but in a planned way, so that it doesn't cost us any more. And it's not always responsive to emergencies, and we can actually plan stuff. So right now, we're not looking at an increase, we're looking at trying to get a set number of hours for that same cost.
Another question, have we reviewed the Corello plant O&M manual for the recommended operations team? When the plant was expanded, they had an O&M manual. Have we compared what we're currently thinking against what we were left with after the plant expansion?
No, we have not, because the conditions and the requirements have changed so much since that was done,
Well,
as far as.
I don't want to presume that they didn't know what it took to operate the plant, and so that seems to me like that might be a very useful baseline for us to at least understand why we have some differences, or might be surprised that it's the same. So we're looking at something north of 100,000 to the 2018 budget impact, and then taking that up another 200,000 in the subsequent year, potentially, depending on what we learn in the coming year.
Right.
Plus whatever the contract services cost. You have
I have no idea, and we're also part of the.
no less than,
Right now, we're hoping to speak with our contractors, like I said, and try, because the amount of money we historically spend per year with the contractors, what we're hoping to do is be able to negotiate a better rate if we can plan it out, instead of everything sort of
I
being an
understand,
emergency
but I mean,
response.
if there's enough work that you think that we would do better to contract some of it out, then there has to be some idea of how many hours we're looking at.
We have not gotten to that level of detail yet. Part of it is, we're also looking at some of the requirements
Okay,
that are
so
coming
it-
in from the state,
So it sounds to me like, in terms of setting our current staffing level,
Mhm.
that we should not put anything in there about contracting it out, because we haven't established that need. We have a thought that there's that need, but we haven't actually established it.
Well, we do know, and if you
Well,
look
this is
at,
the place to put those numbers. That tonight's report is the place to put those numbers, and you're asking us to do something. I'll just be really plain. I won't approve anything that has that kind of unknown budget impact. That, you know, if we get this one crack at it, I'm not satisfied that we've got what we need to make an informed decision, and this is a money decision. And if we can't take a stab in the dark at what it's gonna cost, then I'm like, fine, bring it back when we can. And we can always modify the staffing level anytime we feel the need.
well, let me point to,
But I've seen what happens when we do the hand waving and we approve something,
It,
and it grows on us on our budget like something that we can never excise.
so
okay,
Scott, are you recommending that we approve the existing staffing level and modify our report to the NPDES compliance evaluation later? Because we don't have the numbers? And Beverly, I have a quick question. What happens if we do get this minimum staffing levels if we don't approve it tonight, so that,
We would respond to the state that if the board does not adopt it, then we will tell them that we do not have an established minimum staffing and that we're continuing to work
Well,
toward
that
it.
sounds like a really inverted way to tell them. I mean, if we were to take no action, we have a minimum staffing level, and that would be the existing staffing level.
Well, no, it's not an adopted,
Well,
so,
so we
No,
could,
I don't think we're gonna leave the item until we adopt something, but if we say, you know, what we have now is fine, then that's our adopted. If we say, we take the recommendation for 1.5 this year, then that's the adopted. And Catherine, to answer your question, I'm okay with the 1.5.
right,
Because I can understand what those FTEs are gonna cost. I can
Yeah.
draw on my memory and come up with a number and say, yeah, that 100 sounds about right. And that's the kind of number I'm okay
So
with.
the 100 is for the 1.5 FTE?
It better be, because that's what I
Yes.
was asking about.
Yeah.
and that's because the assumption is when we would be able to onboard, it would be much, you know, we'd be more than halfway through the year before we could onboard the OIT. Obviously,
So, is that what you're saying, the 100 would be for the balance of the year?
yes,
Okay, because that's fine, but then we also need to talk in terms of what we're taking on as an ongoing responsibility, and that would be the annual FTE fully loaded.
right. So, right now, I'm estimating 100,000 for this year, approximately 200,000 for the following year. In addition, that's based on the assumption that we are able to shift off some of the work that we contract out to staff that's here, and that we wouldn't have additional costs for the contract work because we would be trying to do a more efficient job of the stuff that we do contract
So
out.
I wanna make sure I really understand what you're saying. So you're saying that, okay, we're a couple months in to the 2017 budget.
Mhm.
So you're saying it would cost maybe say 110, 120 if we had done this at the start of the budget year. Is that right? I'm saying, take the budget that we have, and we gotta layer on how much money. I gotta go
Right.
get how
Right.
many simoleons to stack
Yeah.
onto this stack.
Right now, I am expecting that it would have cost us, and right now, because I don't know whether or not, but I'm assuming the operator in training, they're gonna come in, they're not gonna be from other member agencies, they're not gonna be in tier 1 of PERS. I'm basing it on an estimate that all of these are brand new employees to the system. My estimation is it's about 100,000 this year, and that it'll be approximately an additional 200,000, so 100,000 for this year, 300,000 for the following year, because it's additional.
Just for the 1.5.
No,
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 that'd be
for all,
this is,
for all
this
of
is
them,
confusing,
Okay.
for 3.5.
or-
for 3.5. Okay, to answer your question,
Hang on, so I hope you can see now where a table would have been handy and some dollar estimates would have been handy, because now we're having to describe in words what we should have seen in a table.
okay, well, and this was great, and I'd asked for feedback, and that, if I'd received
and
that,
I-
I would have been more than happy to
I
provide
know,
it.
but I gotta tell you, in terms of presenting items that have budget impact,
Yeah.
a table to sum it would be really, really helpful. And I mean,
is-
all of the pros is helpful, but when I'm looking at, you know, what's our budget impact? I go back and I talk to my board in Montera and they go, well, how much is it gonna cost me? I gotta do the math.
Okay,
Okay, I shouldn't have to do that.
I
This
think-
is something that we need in budget items.
What I hear you saying is, as a standard rule, is to have a chart so that it's easy to.
Well, in the fiscal
Visual
impact
aids.
section, in the
Yes.
fiscal
Okay.
impact section, it ought to lay it out.
Yes.
You know, on top of what we currently have, we're proposing the following amounts, but the discussion will dictate how much.
Well, may I make a suggestion, looking at the time and all, and we've got some other things to accomplish tonight, that we maybe approve this with the 1.5 FTE and bring it back with a chart, a graphic with visual aid with the numbers so we can see what's going to be happening.
and I just wanted to point out some additional information that was in chart 4, page 204 and 205. I specifically point out the additional FTE that is necessary to take on the tasks that were eliminated or never implemented because things changed, and that's 2.5.
Okay, I'm scrolling down now, to where I get there.
204 and 205.
Page 204?
Yeah, and there was an additional report that went with it that starts on 199, that was the narrative, and then the two attachments
Just,
to that
okay, I mean,
narrative.
that's fair, but I gotta say, the staff report has got to put it in summary form so that we know what we're talking about.
Yeah,
Because I'm gonna do this thing when I go back to my board, and I'm gonna be giving the SAM report, and I'm gonna be looking over things,
Mhm.
and that's the page I'm gonna be looking at. And, I mean, I can collect all my own notes, or I can go to that page and say, here's our bottom line number for what we decided. And it's something
This
that,
feedback is very helpful.
yeah, I mean, I think when we're looking at this and you're asking for, if we don't have it in that form, then we've got all sorts of,
Yeah.
we can imagine all sorts of things about what are we missing. But if we've got
Six
it-
weeks ago, that would have been helpful, I could have done it.
No,
It's
I
been on the
understand.
agenda for many, many weeks, and it would have been really helpful for me to refine this and to make sure you had that information that you needed.
Just in general, any budget impacting item where we say fiscal impact is where we really need to see the bottom
There's
line.
almost never no fiscal impact.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's no fiscal impact or it ought to say have numbers.
and it should say no fiscal impact.
So I think what I would like to do is move that we set the minimum staffing levels at the 2017-18 recommendation of with the current plus the one,
1.5.
hang on, one operator in training and 1/2 of accounting tech.
Well, the minimum staffing won't include the clerical, so it'll just be the additional operator in training. Because they just
Okay.
wanted the O&M part of it, so we will include that in there.
Well, I think we're saying that 1/2 of an account tech is something that we think is a
Yeah.
reasonable thing to do.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm
So-
just, the minimum staffing, they just want us to identify the
Well,
operations.
Feel free to put the one in there,
Yeah.
but we're telling
Yeah.
you the 1.5
Okay.
is something that we're,
Thank you,
And we will revisit the
Yes.
numbers for 18, 19. then
as
we
part of
will
that
decide,
budget process.
As well as the contract.
As well
Yes.
as the
Yeah, I'd like-
contract.
Yeah, with the contract thing, I would really like to see how many hours we have spent on contract and what the cost has been, and how that's gonna be the same if we keep them on retainer.
Yeah.
Or
Well, and we
part-time
haven't
work
gotten that
or-
far along yet.
Yeah,
That was something that we were looking at as doing, we thought we had more time until the state came back and said, we need to do it as part of this. So
Yeah.
that sort of cut down our ability, our analysis time, because we thought we were gonna be talking about this in October, not now.
right.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Second
Who,
number.
it was Boyd?
Boyd.
Okay, Boyd and Reddick.
Reddick.
Okay, thank you very
Just-
much.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
I have a suggestion, again, looking at the 8:25 time. I would suggest that we move to item A, 8A of the force main replacement project.
Good idea.
Items B and C, we do have a little, we don't have as much time pressure. So I would like to get item 8A presented and hopefully approved.
Okay.
And I'm going to move back there because it looks like we have a.
Yes,
Who
it's a.
here's read the 100 or 150 pages in the packet on those?
Well, yes, it was a great sleeping aid.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So as you recall, we had been given direction to continue the design process for the force main replacement project. And we used all of the segments that were affected by the spills this year. And we worked with SRT. We put together the design, and now we're at the point where we need the board to approve the design documents and authorize us to go forward with the bidding process. It's fortuitous in its timing because we also now have the issue of the funding from the assessments resolved through the stipulation and order. So it's perfect timing for this to be coming together. So at this point, I will turn it over to Kishan, who will give you his presentation, and then we also have Tim Monahan here from SRT who can answer questions.
Okay, I'll give you a quick update of the complete project which is ready to go out for a bid. The following design documents have been completed. The topographical survey has been completed, a biological resource assessment, and a wetlands delineation has been done by an outside party that has been completed. The plans, profiles, details, and specifications, along with the construction cost estimate, are all ready and ready and in the bid package. The schedule for bidding process is as follows. We plan on advertising in the next few days if it gets approved tonight. And the bids would be due from the bidders on the 29th of September. And we propose to award the contract in the second week of October. We had actually planned it on the 9th of October, but 9th October being a holiday, we will not be able to hold the board meeting on the 9th of October. So we'll have to see what is the alternate possible, so that we can have it as early as possible, maybe a special meeting or whatever, which can be discussed later. We expect the construction to start on November 1st. Assuming that the contract gets awarded in the second week of October, gives a little time for the contractor to give us the various bonds, performance bond and the various bonds, whatever it is, construction bond, and then go for insurance, then have a kickoff meeting. The actual construction can start in the 1st of November. We expect that the construction will take about 180 days, which will go on till April. Now, I will go into the various parts of bidding a little later, but just to recap, this was shown to you a couple of meetings earlier. We have these segments. This is the segment 1, and this portion is segment 2, segment 3, and segment 4. Now, the segment 1 is the segment where we had the major SSO at Magellan, which concluded a couple of weeks back that it was 340,000. And segment 2 has no breaks. Segment 3, there were 4 breaks. In segment 4, absolutely no breaks. Now our cost estimate for all the 4 segments is as follows, where we have segment 3, which is the largest because it goes through the creek. That's why it's 724,000. Whereas the segment 4, which is not yet designed, has a small portion which is force main, and then it goes into the gravity section, which is 501,000, and the design is not yet started for it. What we plan on doing is, we plan on going out for a base bid, which is mandatory for bidding, which is segment 1 and segment 3, and that adds up to 1.4 million. And then we propose to have an alternate bid, adding segment 2 and maybe adding segment 4, which is not yet designed but could be added at a later stage. So just segment 1, 2, and 3 put together gives a total of 1.8 million. So depending upon how the prices come, these are the engineer's estimate, and depending on how the prices come, we could either do 1 and 3 or 1, 2, and 3 this year. Now the other items are basic permits, which is the CDP and the encroachment permits, which the contractor is responsible for doing that. And we also have a grant funding program. We have a workshop which we are attending in September, that is for the hazard mitigation grant program. The applications are due on November 1st, and when we attend the workshop in September, we would know how long they would take to decide once we submit the applications by November 1st. So that's being pursued, and we have already submitted the permit to the county for the neck deck part of it. The documents are already there. We submitted it on the 3rd of August. So normally they take about 30 days, so that the review time is still going on, so we still haven't heard back from the county. So this is the process. I am available, and Monahan is available for any questions, please.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there a disadvantage to going segment 1 followed by segment 2 followed by segment 3, or the other plan, segment 1, 3 followed by 2? What are the advantages and disadvantages of those two scenarios?
Keyshawn?
Yeah, right.
The advantage of doing.
Tim, if you could, over here.
Pardon?
For the
If
audience.
microphone picks up,
Yeah.
it could be seen.
Yes.
Waste the effort.
Yeah, the advantage of doing segment 1 and 3 together first is because they're the most critical. They've broken before. Segment 2 has no history of breaks in, it's probably the easiest section. That's the section, and again, the segments are designated between the bypass vaults that we installed in 2014. And so that's how we come up with segment 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the segment between what we call station 3800 and 5150, which is right near the creek, that's segment 2. It's the easiest, it's open grass, there's a few driveways we need to, get across, and that pipe has had no history of breaks yet. I mean, so that's why we want to put that off and go to the most critical pipes, which are segment 1 and segment 3.
And there's no disadvantage to doing it that way.
I don't believe there's be any disadvantage. The reason we wanted to pull it in as a bid alternate is we're hoping that the prices are reasonable and we can get some good contractors, hopefully a local contractor who doesn't have an exorbitant mobilization cost or anything like that.
You want to only mobilize once if possible.
Exactly, and that's reflected in the cost. That we've, obviously if we get all 3 segments together, it'll be one mobilization.
Yeah, that was my question. I think.
And we had a lengthy conversation about this as we were developing the budget towards the end of the fiscal year about how much funding we potentially could get and how much of the segments that could potentially get us compared to trying to do them all sort of together. One of the benefits is if we do get the grant funding, that would allow us to do more than we had the funding for this year. Obviously, that would help us get those other segments done, which is another benefit of having it all bid together as alternates, so we can add on if we locate other funding sources.
Mm-hmm.
With 180-day construction schedule running to, what was it, April?
May.
You guys do know that sometimes it rains during the winter here.
Yeah. This isn't an ideal time.
No,
Yes.
I'd rather not be doing it in the rain.
So, I was not able to read every word of the bid stuff.
It's mostly drawings.
Kind
Yeah.
of glazed over after about a third of it. But I did find a couple typos.
Thank you.
Is the contractor required to use all the BMPs to contain everything if there's heavy rains? And I mean, we don't want mud on Highway 1.
No, obviously, we want to keep this, as clean a project as possible. If we need to shut down because of heavy rains, we'll stipulate that to the contractor, say, okay, we're not going to be working if Patrol Pump Station is, running full bore.
But in addition to that, that of course is an absolute requirement. The dirt basically has to be contained on site and not be allowed to wash onto the streets.
Take a look at 357, and you can see hay bales and all sorts of things specified in the drawings.
Right.
And all the critical places.
I think we can assume the contractor and the engineers are professionals and know what they're doing.
Just checking.
But it would be great to have it spelled out in the bids, like what we'll do during the rainy season, because it spans the entire rainy season.
It does, and again, it's not ideal, but in an emergency situation, I'm hoping that we get, a significant amount of work done before the real rains come in December, but.
Understood, it's just, I'm hoping that any agreement we enter into sort of spells out how we deal with storms and storm-related impacts and things like that.
Yeah, and we do have language in the front end and in the technical specs and on the drawings, stipulating that, they're responsible if sewage spills, they're responsible to get SWIP permit, which is Stormwater Pollution Prevention Program. And the contractors are aware of that. And the way we've set it up, we've cordoned off the wetlands areas that were delineated by the other consultant, and we're drilling beneath them, you know, to try to avoid any impact to these sensitive habitats.
When you say drilling, you're talking jack and bore.
Horizontal
Horizontal.
direction. It's a similar trenches technique.
The process, is there a kickoff meeting with the contractor before they actually mobilize and engage in
Yes.
work?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
It's normally-
I think we're asking just, and I know you will, but just belt and suspenders, please discuss with them at the kickoff, what our expectations are for management during heavy downpour events.
Yeah.
It would make us feel better.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
of course.
Yeah, that's it.
Where is equipment and materials going to be staged? Is that here, there?
Well, that's something we'll talk about at the pre-construction meeting. We think there's enough room down at the patrol pump station for stockpiling pipe. Otherwise, we'll need to discuss, you know, perhaps nighttime storage of, you know, some pieces of equipment down here at the plant.
Right.
In most cases, when we did the work in 2014, the contractor had equipment, but he kept it, you know, right on site. They weren't vandalized, it wasn't unsightly. We did use the skateboard park to stockpile some equipment, you know, when we were doing the wet weather work and the force main work.
That's Caltrans.
The skate,
The,
Juan Burnham Strip?
That's owned by Caltrans, yeah.
Okay,
well, the skateboard ramp is this far off of Granada's property. It was very carefully positioned to not be on our property.
okay. So to the south of that is that wide open area where?
South meaning the ocean side.
The-
Caltrans has,
Ostensible south.
So inland is Granada, and towards the ocean is Caltrans. Is that how?
And it parallels the highway.
yeah, well, the highway actually runs east-west through Granada.
Yeah.
So yeah, south, the Granada board's gotten fairly resistant to ugly construction stuff on our property.
So you might wanna
Well-
talk to Caltrans, so you know you can put it on theirs and not Granada's.
Talk to Caltrans and talk to Chuck, I mean, because, right? Talk to your general manager, right?
And it's not his decision.
Understood, but he would be the staff person who our folks can talk to bring any request to your board, correct?
Actually, Julia would be better, and you know, she's more familiar with the issues of the board.
Granada
I-
staff probably has a good sense of what the board is gonna require, but
I
they
would,
own a lot of land there that's parked on by a lot of things, so.
I would consider that cost effectiveness should be a part of the consideration here too, because it's not gonna be there permanently, it's a temporary.
And expedience of permissions and all those good things.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, there was a possibility that we discussed but didn't act on, was storing some of the equipment and, you know, pipe and so forth in the parking lot of the school there, but we thought with school being back in session, that parking lot is probably full.
It's at full every
Yeah.
morning.
well,
So-
you know, maybe you and I can discuss it, and in particular, you should talk to Tanya about some of the stuff that was there for the last huge project that, it could have been made a lot less unsightly than it was. The contractor just didn't care, and it was horrible.
You know, I recall we got on them to
Yeah.
straighten out and organize and look more tidy.
Okay, do we have any more questions?
I have one thing, so, I don't wanna try and find it real fast here, but I thought somewhere in the early part that I did read, it said something about completion within 30 days, but here we have 180.
It's not gonna be completed in
No.
30 days, I think you're
Yeah.
talking about the bid process.
Okay.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Motion and a
Deborah
second?
Penrose can have
Okay,
it.
I was gonna say, who are we calling that one on? Okay.
Okay,
Obviously.
any more questions or comments?
Penrose.
Hearing none, all those in
Can I
favor?
just email Beverly some typo corrections?
Yes.
That would
Aye.
be good. Aye.
Please do.
Aye.
Wait,
Nays,
we all just voted.
abstentions?
Right?
Okay.
Okay, moving back to, well, let's move on to new
Thank you.
business B, 8B, receive and discuss other OPEB.
Yes.
That would be other post-employment benefits, actuarial valuation as required by GASB 45. I'm assuming we don't have, since we don't have the actuarial here, the actuary here, we can get this done fairly quickly.
Yeah, I deferred to not doing that, I sat through those. And I realized after we had put this packet together and it was already so lengthy, that I did not attach the previous version, the Idelson version, so you have a copy here and I've already put it on the website for reference, since it was referred to in the staff report, so just, you know, you do have that. The items that have changed is it used to be every 3 years, now it's every 2 years that we have to do the valuation. GASB 75 will take effect now. So the audit that you see this time next year for the fiscal year ending June 30, 18 will include booking the liability of $408,000. It is not just a note, it is an actual liability. The entire unfunded liability will be booked as a liability.
On this,
On Sam?
17-18 budget?
On the 17-18 audit. So not the audit you're gonna see in a month or two,
Okay.
but the audit for the fiscal year ending June 30, 18. So the year we're in right now, when they come around and do the audit, we will actually have to book $408,000 for the unfunded liability, and that's because of GASB 75.
Could you, for the audience, talk about what GASBs are?
Governmental Accounting Standard Board,
And 45 is?
that's the one that established that governmental agencies have to account for post-employment benefits.
And
So when you-
75?
75 is an additional requirement. It used to be under 45, you had to do the valuation and you had to have notes in your financial statements that described basically a summary of what's in your valuation and what those benefits will cost in the current fiscal year and how we're addressing them going forward. 74 and 75 deal with 74 deals with like the PARS trust, the one where you're actually investing in it, if you are. 75 is for the agencies, that's us. And that takes place this year, we have to account for it. And basically what it says is it's no longer just a note to your financials, it is an actual liability, so it actually affects your balance sheet.
It's about transparency.
It's about
And letting the public
transparency.
know what the decisions that have been
Yeah.
made in the past, how they affect the future.
Right, and 2 years ago, we started doing that with our retirement benefits, CalPERS and various other retirement systems. And 3 years later, now it's time to do it for the other post-employment benefits. Primarily for SAM, that's just retirement benefits. We have 2 tiers. The employees that were hired by SAM as of January 1, 2013 are in tier 2. They only get contributions to retirement medical while they work here. When they retire or if they leave, they get no more. Employees that were hired prior to January 1, 2013 get, once they retire, $115 a month that they get basically reimbursed for the cost of retirement medical for the rest of their assumed life. And that's part of what the actuaries do is they look and see how long, when do people normally retire, how long they live, and how much money that's gonna cost. And GASB 45 was supposed to be implemented 2009. So we haven't addressed it. We've been doing what we call as pay-as-you-go, which means we're not setting aside anything for current and future retirees. We are only paying exactly the amount that we owe for the retirees that have already retired. And that was supposed
What's wrong with doing it that way?
It's not acceptable under GASB. You're supposed to fund that liability. It's now been in place for all that time. Most agencies have implemented some form of prepayment to start addressing that.
But it basically means setting aside the money,
May-
piling it up and not getting any benefit from it.
May I suggest that since we have only 12 minutes left in the meeting, that we approve this, since none of us are actuaries? And if you want to discuss more about GASB's later, we can put it at the bottom of the to-do agendas.
Well, what exactly would we be approving here?
You're just accepting the
Oh, we're
report.
just discussing it,
And
okay.
then you can give staff direction if you want to. We had talked about previously as part of the budget, making sure we had sufficient funding. There's also 3 different mechanisms for funding the future liability. And it will only grow as we don't set any money aside, because the assumptions are based on that you fund it and you do get the benefit of the performance of whatever you put it in, so,
That's right.
yeah.
So why the recommendation for alternative 2?
Why the recommendation for alternative 2? The recommendation for alternative 2 is it gives it a more stable, from a budgetary standpoint. Doing 1 right now, because it would take a budget amendment to be able to fund anything else. I built in basically an assumed amount because I hadn't received the report yet. It's sufficient to cover the pay-as-you-go and basically a small amount to pre-fund, so we can demonstrate that we have started the process. But when you look at page 368, it's the 3 different scenarios. Given the consideration and the discussions with the member agencies about ever-increasing budgets and or fluctuating budgets, it seems that the level contribution over 20 years is the one that is easier for the member agencies to track, because it's the same amount for the pre-funding. It is also not recommended to use the third column, which is the level percent of unfunded liability, because it takes it out way too many years.
And this is an annual cost?
Yes.
Or, okay.
It's the pay-as-you-go plus the level contribution, or one of the other 2. And as you can see, the majority of the cost goes out. The recommendation under the current GASB is that you fund it over what is considered the normal lifetime of an employee, so how long they normally work. So most employees are somewhere between 20 and 30 years of employment. This is stretching it out well beyond that, which means you're not really funding it during the time the person is employed with you. That's why that one's not really a healthy recommendation from the actuaries. Columns where it's the level contribution over 20 years or the constant percentage increase, at least you're funding it under what would be considered a normal employee lifetime.
And this is per person per year?
This is total,
Total.
because we have 2 tiers. So these are for the employees who are currently retired already, or those who qualify for tier 1, because they were here prior to January 1, 2013. That's all this deals with. We don't pay for the tier 2 employees once they've retired. And so that's why the recommendation for the 2 phase. One is just, let's start doing a little bit this year, and then as we're talking with the finance committee and the member agencies about next year's budget, talking about building in. My recommendation is the level funding, just because it's a nice flat number, but I understanding that there may be another choice, and there could be a combination. That's just staff's recommendation. Primarily, it's, do you want me to start having conversations with PARS to come in and do a presentation about pre-funding, which this is assuming we're going to do something.
And this is for the 17-18 budget?
Well, the 17-18 has some money built into it, so I'd like to at least get the process started, even if we just make a token contribution, and then we can talk about how much we want to fund going forward as part of the next year's budget process.
Okay. And so, do we need a motion then? How do
You can
we-
just give direction, and if you want me to start that discussion, obviously it's staff time, so it's going to be more than the couple of hours of staff just
Right.
making a few phone calls, plus I will reach out to PARS, and I will have them come in to do a presentation to talk about the various options that their plan
I think
has.
that would be good.
Which one was the most cost effective over the long term?
Funding it faster sooner is always,
Yeah.
because you get the benefit of the whatever the earnings are. A lot of agencies seeded and put in a lump sum to start it so that they're actually earning. So the faster you get the money in there, the faster you reach the end.
I believe Benjamin Franklin said the compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world.
The numbers aren't exactly budget busters, and so I'm inclined to go with the one that's the most cost effective over the long term.
But we can discuss that
Yes.
for next year's
Yes,
budget.
I'm not
We
asking
don't have
for
to
that
make
this year.
decision now.
But I just wanted to know, because I would present this to PARS and have them put together a couple of options in their plans to come present and discuss. So I
Sounds
just
good.
wanted to know if you wanted me to go down that road.
That sounds good.
Sounds good.
Okay.
And we've got 6.5 minutes left until 9 o'clock. I don't think we will be able to accomplish either item 7B or 7C on legal
Okay.
expenses. So let's move on, and so we should put those next time.
Yes,
And let's move on to general manager's report, attorney report, director's reports, and we've got some topics for future.
I just wanted to quickly point out that as one of the requests, we have been putting the flags on the maps to reflect spills, and we've been doing that for some time. And I'm happy to report that barring any unforeseen circumstances, the majority of the flags that still remain, that rolling 12 months, were related to the storms. And that I believe we only have one up there that is still related to sort of fog routes and those kinds of things. And I believe that that is because of the changes in how we're doing the collection, the contract collection services, and that we implemented many of the things that the Humphrey report had recommended, and I believe this is an indication that we're seeing the results of that.
When you give a list of media articles, could you include the URLs?
Sure. Hadn't requested that before, but I will certainly add that going forward.
Thank you.
Doesn't help people with printed copies, but, oh well.
Yeah, okay. I can certainly do that for the electronic version.
Okay, is that the end of managers' reports, attorneys'
Yes.
reports? You were at CASA,
I was at CASA. I started off,
which for the audience is?
California Association of Sanitation Agencies. I was asked to and did give a presentation on Prop 26 and Prop 218 implications of the accessory dwelling unit law, which was SB 1069 in 2016 and SB 229, which is making its way through the legislature now.
I'd love
There-
to see that presentation.
Well, we could bring it down here, I guess.
Did you
At some
have a
point.
bottom line on?
Well, the bottom line, the problem is, what SB 1069 and 229 do is they say if you're gonna create an accessory dwelling unit within existing living space, which is defined as either within the building, could be a garage conversion, or could be inside an existing accessory structure, you're not allowed to have a new connection, a line for a sewer lateral or water line if it's, you're providing water, and you're not allowed to charge what would be what's called, a capacity charge, which is what you charge for facilities that people have to buy into, new facilities and existing
So the
facilities.
usage goes up, but you can't, the agencies can't
Increase
charge for the
capacity.
increased usage.
Yes, that's correct, and
And whose brilliant idea is this?
this was the legislature's idea as to how to create a larger stock of affordable housing. I have my own views about whether this, I consider it a Band-Aid approach. And to the extent community is one that is willing to have Airbnbs, it ends up really not so much being affordable housing as being more income for the primary homeowner, but
Affordable tourist attractions.
could be. I mean, so it is what it is.
So what's
And-
the status of that bill?
Well, the bill was originally passed in 2016. It was focused on special districts although because the horror stories that they were trying to fix, the $20,000, $30,000 fees for a garage conversion, were all special districts. But the way the language was written in the legislature's wisdom, they defined who it applied to as a local agency, which is a city or county. So that's what this year's bill is going to fix. But, so, the bottom line is, there's a
It wasn't
cash.
broken enough, so they're gonna break it completely.
Yeah, so the bottom line is, there's a bit of a shortfall there for that capacity that hasn't been purchased, and I discussed what that means under Prop 226 and 218. The simple way to fix it is to just put a surcharge on the rate, so that the person that has newly connected to the system without paying anything for it can pay it over time. But there's a variety of other things that were discussed. And on my panel, there was a rate consultant who said something I'd never heard before, but under the building code, the average home has 21 fixture units. And I think a toilet is 2, a dishwasher is 3, and most everything else is 1. And so he said one of the ways that if there was an actual expansion taking place, you're required to charge proportionate to either fixture units or size. And so you could do a calculation as a rate consultant or a fee consultant based upon the number of fixtures in the new, or the average number of fixtures in an accessory dwelling unit. So that would be a way to calculate that, because that's a whole different way of calculating that than most agencies do. So
Yeah,
that's
this
sort of it in a nutshell. I mean, I talked a lot of it. Does this violate Prop 26 here and this way, and where's their wiggle room, and that sort of thing. But
Did they discuss at any level, the possibility for using either a second unit or whatever it becomes, as using a way to require a lateral inspection to take care of any I&I problems?
that didn't come up as far as I know. It's certainly not in the legislation.
Because it would
Yeah.
seem to me it would make sense if somebody's applying and putting in a second unit or an Airbnb, that the agency could ask for a lateral inspection because of increased usage of the lateral, potential increased
Well, but yeah,
problems, and it might be something to consider.
that makes sense. That makes sense to me. I mean, the objective was to keep the costs down, but it seems to be a legitimate question if the existing sewer laterals is sufficient to carry the extra flow. I mean, it doesn't
Right.
seem unreasonable, and it seems like within police powers, an agency should be able to ask for something like that.
I
Would a
mean-
realtor challenge it?
Of course.
Of course. I may ask Dave to get in touch with you on that.
Okay, sure.
Because this would be a way for at least Montera to be addressing the I&I problems.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, I'm trying to remember who was discussing it, but East Bay Mud, as a result of being sued in federal court in a consent decree, every time a property changes hands within the area that East Bay Mud treats the sewage, you're required to have your lateral inspected, and if it's not up to snuff, it's got to be fixed.
Well, some of us would love to see that requirement imposed on us by the state, because any local agency that tries to deal with the real estate issues gang up on us.
And I just wanna point out that it's
It
nine
is
oh one.
Whoops.
9:01, and it's, do I have a motion?
I hear
to
we're
adjourn?
adjourned.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.